Thank you, Anne. Is it Anne Levine? Did I say
Yes.
that? Okay. Anne Levine is with us from WOMR in Massachusetts. And she's going to talk today about her experiences interviewing Radio Kraina in Ukraine. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. This is really great. And trying to think if there's anything else I needed to say was, I'm also just going to put a couple articles that Sharon and Davine and Simon have shared with me about Ukraine and Russia. And then with that, yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being here and for so much support. It means so much to me. This is quite a thing that's going on with me and this group of extraordinary people. I'm not sure. Well, let me just say that I spoke to Bogdan. His name is Bogdan Bolkovetsky. That's common knowledge. I spoke to him today twice. And I talked to him about doing a Zoom call with us. And he said he would be happy to do that. And that it's really difficult. They have a major connectivity problem. And so, and it would depend, you know, on what might happen that minute. So, you know, given that we could put it together technically, he'd be happy to do that. He's sends greetings. He's thrilled that this is happening and that people want to hear from him, from them. There are now, of the original 26 stations in the Kraina FM network, which is now officially called Radio National Resistance. Excuse me. But that's a mouthful for us. So I still refer to it as Kraina FM when I'm talking to them and interviewing them. I guess I need to make that clearer going forward. Kraina FM, as it was, which was a 24/7 pop radio station, was their thing that made them really big in Ukraine, is that they are the only all Ukrainian radio station. They only play Ukrainian music and they only speak Ukrainian. There's no Russian, no English, no French, no anything else that you find on every other station there. So they've always stood for strong patriotism and strong Ukrainian identity. So to them, this is particularly hitting them where it hurts as radio people, this war. I cannot describe to you how my life has changed since March 18th when I met them. Met them virtually, obviously. This has kind of turned into what I do 24/7. Communicate with them and try to help them out in a bunch of different ways. So with that, I'm not sure what any or all of you would like to hear from me, but I am happy to take any question about anything. You know, there's a lot I can say, and I'm happy to say it.
Does anyone have any specific questions I'd like to start with? David.
First of all, Anne, this clearly, just listening to you talk about this is clearly moving you, this whole effort that you've gone through. And again, I echo what everybody else has said. Thank you for doing this, and also for sharing it with us. And throughout the course of this conversation, if there are ways we can help, I personally would love to, if I can. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of questions, and I'm not even sure where to start.
Where do you
I'll let others.
This situation maybe appeals to us as radio people, because as kind of a, you know, a live of how do you stay on the air, and what do you do in the midst of a national emergency, you know, be it a natural disaster or a war. But what's really gripping, Anne, and I think you do the wonderful job, is to bring out the human element. Bogdan's, you know, personal experience, and, you know, everybody has had family members or friends lost in this war and or displaced. His fleeing from Kyiv, and how they drove all day and most of the night and ended up at a gas station that had just been bombed. That was just a wonderful story. Story doesn't do it justice. I mean, it's just, you know, you had me on the edge of the seat, and just the horrors of war and how it affects people on so many levels is just, and having a front seat to that. I think that's just so important to get that across, and something that we don't really experience otherwise. And he, through you, just it's gripping, and so that's why I commend you, and I think it's important that this get to as wide an audience as possible. I had a couple of just mundane technical questions.
Sure.
Initially I thought all of their other signals were simulcasting their Kyiv signal. Apparently that's not the case. Do they have individual automated stations scattered throughout the country? Is that right? And then these segments are plugged in by local people, or by their remote access to that automation or something? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Some of them are, and they do this thing now, all the stations, where they do this quarter hourly announcement break. And that is across all the networks. And Roman is the voice of the network. And so his voice is very well known in Ukraine. He's a voiceover actor. He does tons of commercials. And so he does these announcement breaks every 15 minutes where they broadcast requests from the Army and from individuals.
Right.
And so those are national. And then there are the individual stations, of which there are, I guess 8 of them have been wiped out, but I think there are like 16 left.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing their own stuff with those 15-minute breaks.
Are they individually owned, or does
No,
Roman have interest in all of them, or they own all of them?
It's Radio Corp.
Yeah, they work for the company, but yeah.
Radio Corp owns all of them.
Okay, all right.
And Bogdan is the general manager of Kraina, of the whole thing.
And Roman is the program director, as I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, and the voice. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say that as far as what's happening with the station and with the network, I can't even call it a station practically now, is that Bogdan is in charge of the whole thing. He is making all the decisions on everything. So Roman isn't having as much input as far as decision making goes.
But Bogdan has actually, he was an English teacher, so that helps. His English is very good, and he probably has more time then to do these interviews than Roman. But I know Roman is also multilingual, so as most
Well,
people.
let me just address that too right now, which is Roman won't do any interviews.
Oh, okay.
He said he asked me to say that if you want, you can send me questions for him, which I will get to him, and he will record the answers. And so there would be audio files from him ultimately, but he won't do a live interview.
Mhm.
And that's just how he is. You know, that's how he feels about it. He's not comfortable.
And just sort of an unrelated little tidbit, that big tower in Kyiv that we saw, 3 days into the war that was bombed, that their FM antenna is on that tower.
Correct.
That's a 1,600 foot self-supporting tower, which is huge for a self-supporting tower. It's one of the largest self-supporting towers in the entire world. And the bombing, fortunately, they were off the air from that signal for about a week. So apparently it didn't damage things too badly, and the tower is still standing, obviously. So, but anyway, that's something that a lot of people remember seeing on the TV. Anyway, random tidbit.
No.
Okay. Those were just miscellaneous questions I had.
Sure.
Anne, how are you structuring your communication with them now? Are you communicating with them for content for your podcast, or what is his understanding of how you're using the recordings you make of him?
I don't make any recordings of him unless we're clear that we're recording and that I'm asking him specific questions and he knows they're going to go out on the air. So when I say that I speak to him, we speak a couple times a day at least, depending on what's going on with them. And but none of that's recorded.
And they're what, 10 hours ahead of us, or 10 hours?
7.
Okay.
Well, 7 hours ahead of the East Coast. I'm in Cape Cod.
So do you have a plan on how you want to, are your communications really focused on creating content, or is it really a different type of communication at this point?
It's a combination of things. We'll be talking about, some real nuts and bolts things, like what they're trying to get right now. They're desperate for coagulants. And so, I'll be talking to them about that, for instance. I got a list today from a surgeon at the front of medications. I thought it was going to be maybe 10 things that they're short of. I was thinking, well, insulin, antibiotic, painkiller, 298 drugs. And at the bottom in red marker, it says, however, we need hemostatic gauze above and beyond any of this stuff. People are bleeding out like crazy. So we talk about stuff like that. And then I say, okay, so then, in the course of these conversations, other things come out, personal things. And those are the ones that I grab and I take notes on that are really good for an interview. Bogdan is brilliant and hilarious and creative and agile. He's also a documentary filmmaker. And so in the next interview I do with him, we're going to be talking about some of that and what he's gone through trying to help make this film of the war at the same time that all this other stuff is going on. So that's really long-winded answer, Ursula, I'm sorry, but I am focusing on, I think I mentioned to you, there's this story about what he went through in Kiev to get his government press pass laminated, printed, to get a lanyard and to get a sleeve to put it in. And it's an amazing, it's just a crazy story. And it's fascinating. And so I said, that's one I want to do on the air. There are so many things you don't think about. The prohibition, it's not prohibition, what is that? Where they said they can't have booze, you know, in the country. Never would have thought of that. And so those are the kinds of things I'm trying to glean that I think really capture people's attention. I want it to be interesting, and so much of it is just fascinating. And it's as much of a surprise to them as it is to us. So I am so blessed because I don't like that word, but I don't know what else to say. I said it in the interview too. I feel so fortunate to kind of have teamed up with someone there who wants to keep talking to me as this goes along. And so he says, you know, as long as we have an audience, I'll keep giving you interviews.
How did you first connect with him? I emailed, correspond with Roman, by the way, before I found your program, and then like that same afternoon. And so but you were had already done these programs, and it's, yeah. How did you first find him or find each other?
Well, I was very persistent. And it wasn't easy. I kept going. I mean, they had like an abandoned Twitter account, for instance. Same thing with their Facebook account. There were a lot of what seemed to be dead ends. But as it turns out, they're not. They are listening. They're not responding. And so once they felt like, okay, this sounds like someone who's for real, someone we can trust, which partly has to do with the fact that I'm a second generation American whose grandparents fled Ukraine. One fled Odessa, one fled Kiev. And so when this whole thing started, I was very ambivalent, I have to admit. And that changed very quickly. So at any rate, I'm very passionate about it. It's very personal. And I just felt like, I don't care what happens. I'm going to tear the world apart until I find these guys and at least get a response. And I asked Bogdan last night, I said, why did you respond to me? as opposed to hundreds of other people that I know had contacted them. And he said, well, you wouldn't shut up. And absolutely. And you also offered to help. And he said, most people wanted something from us. And he said, we were really inspired by you saying you wanted to help us. So that's, and I told them about myself and my history with Ukraine and how I felt about it. And they said, now we feel that way. Now we feel like, I guess it's clear I'm talking about a Jewish background. And my family was chased out. Some got out, a lot didn't. And I was raised hearing that Ukrainians are the worst, that they were horrible to the Jews, to the Ukrainian Jews. So we've had conversations about that. And he says, now I know how you feel, because they're after us because we're Ukrainian. And they feel a real connection to other people who have been there and have been violently removed. So that was sort of what happened. It started out as a conversation. I was very honest. And he said, the fact that you were, you just wouldn't stop.
Yeah, by the way, the station website is active.
Yes.
And if you run it through Google Translate, it's very readable. So that's how I connected with Roman. But so
yeah,
what are the plans for the programs, or is it figured out yet for ongoing that'll be distributed?
Well, as far as, I think Ursula knows more about that than I do, actually. I'm going to keep doing interviews and keep putting them out. And I'm also happy to facilitate other people interviewing them. They can do whatever they want to do. They do like the feeling that there's a little bit of a firewall with me. But anyone can contact them and do what they want. But I am happy to, Bogdan said, tell anyone that's interested in interviewing me themselves that I want them to speak to you first. So, because his sense is that this, will get big and there will be too much for him to handle.
I'm
Also,
going to go to Sharon and then Levine.
Thank you. I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to listen to the show. I've just found out about it. So thank you, Ursula and Levine, for bringing it to my attention. We're really trying to, this is a very interesting topic for our listeners, certainly, and we're trying to do all we can as well. But I feel a little bit lost in the conversation, having not listened to the show, because I don't know who these characters are and I don't know what your show is like. And so I guess I'm just wondering if you could give a little bit of background, maybe speak to your radio show and how you incorporate the interviews in there and that sort of thing, if you don't mind, just quickly, so I could kind of
sure. And the answer to it is it's pretty crazy, because my show that I've been doing for 12 years is basically comedy, pop culture, a lot of it is Jewish centric and what it's like to be who I am, where I am on Cape Cod. And we have really built up an audience of listeners that just love this whole thing. And so right now I'm trying to figure out, I mean, I've broadcast these first two as well as done my usual show as a podcast because, you know, one episode of War was fine. Two, you know, they're starting to drop off a little bit. So it doesn't fit into my show. And I'm not sure how it's going to work going forward. Whether or not these interviews may get put in audio port and people can pick them up. It'll be something like that unless my station manager, unless John Braden decides to do something else at
So
WOMR.
Right now, they're just individual interviews on audio port. Is that how people are?
No, they're
Oh.
been
What?
broadcast on our air, and also they're available as podcasts.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And the links are up on the right now or not? I guess not.
I don't have any.
So you have two approximately 1 hour that are on your website, right?
Right. On annatnight.com. They stream on WOMR.org. And we have a big group on Facebook that talks about the shows, interacts about them. My husband, Michael, is with me on these shows, and he's very involved in this too. He does all the tech stuff. I am, in fact, going to put my oxygen on. I have a rare lung disease, and I stopped being able to go to the studio some years ago. So we do all this from home. And
I just want to say a word about the radio content. Sorry, my computer froze, so I'm sneaking into Stephanie's window here. So what I see in terms of radio content, and Anne, tell me if this is right for you. There is this initial interview, which is very, very good, that we're going to turn into a Sprouts show just because it really should get out there. Whether you want to upload the whole interview, which is an hour long, is up to Anne. We would have to take the FCC violations out of it, unfortunately. There are some, but the rest, if Anne wants to put up the whole interview, we certainly can do that. And I talked to John, and we're going to set up an audio port account for you so you can upload content whenever you want. And my understanding was that we might turn this other interview about the press pass and the documentary, if it turns out to be a good interview, that we could also make that into a Sprouts show, and we'll work with Anne to do that. And otherwise, words as what I suggested to Anne is just that when she records interviews, just to upload into the audio port as actualities interviews for people to use as they see fit. And that seems to be the best way to handle all this. Now, if those of you who are here on the call are interested, we could try to organize a meeting with him and try and record an interview with him so that you could ask questions. And it sounds like he's open to it, as long as I do feel very strongly that this should always be hosted by Anne so that it stays within a structure that feels safe for him. But we could try it, and if the technology works, we could try and do it if there's interest. If not, I don't think we have to try and do it. I think what Anne's doing is great. It stands by itself. As far as the assistance to the Ukrainians, we had a pretty long meeting with our lawyer about this, and it's pretty dicey to use the air to recruit money or assistance. However, we could do it through listservs. We could organize a campaign, asking stations to get the word out to their members if they feel comfortable doing that. And, if you have a Facebook page about this, you can always, you can tell people on the air that there is a Facebook page about this if they're interested in seeing more. So just to kind of stay within the FCC guidelines, that's what we could do, which I think could be very effective. So that's kind of what I'm suggesting, that Anne just provide the interviews as they're possible, and just put them up in audio port and notify folks that the content is there. Does that make sense to you, Anne?
Sure.
Okay.
My goal is to get them.
Ursula. Sorry.
My goal is to get them as much help as I can, period. So anything we can do to facilitate getting them help, which essentially boils down to money. I have a lot of people asking me all the time, what can I do? What can I do? And I don't know how to say to people what they really need at the end of the day, or right this second, actually, is money. It doesn't feel, it's not a warm, cozy feeling, as much as, say, sending a box of gauze or whatever. But, and I felt like that initially myself. I wanted to somehow have it be more personal. But so
Does money help with getting gauze?
what?
Does money help with getting gauze?
100%.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
is this a non-commercial radio station? Is it a commercial radio station?
This was a commercial radio station. On February 24th, they lost every sponsor. None of them is earning a dime. None of them. And when I spoke to Bogdan about trying to rally the radio community to keep them going as a station, and even I was getting someone at iHeartRadio to talk to me about that, like somebody to take them under their wing. And he said, absolutely not. We won't use a penny for ourselves. We will give it all to, like in this case, to buy gauze or whatever it is. So,
Do you have
said
any
just-
other, sorry, go ahead.
done.
Oh, I was going to say, did you have any other questions, Sharon?
No, that was all. The reason I asked, we were trying to do a fundraiser where the donations would go to a non-commercial college community station. We don't even know if these things exist anymore. So that's why I was asking, maybe this is the closest thing right now, at least that we can find.
Yeah, no, they are not, they are doing a service for their country, and they are not earning any money. And all of them are still there. All of the individual managers are still in their cities at their stations, except for the ones who were in Kyiv. So,
Do they have plans to move back into the offices in Kyiv now that things are a little bit quieter, or
I can't talk about that.
okay.
Levine, did you still have a question?
So part of my question was already answered. I just wanted to say that we are willing to carry anything that you're able to put out here in our neck of the woods. And that was my question, is what can we do to help?
Well, putting out the interviews is great. You know, getting word out as much as possible. And money is, you know, the bottom line, what helps them. Just the logistics I was saying earlier, I think, of sending them something is crazy.
So is there a way we could do like a GoFundMe? GoFund Ukraine?
GoFundMe, well, let's put it this way. You could do a GoFundMe. Absolutely. GoFundMe took me off their platform because they have this thing about anyone raising money for anything that's potentially war forward. I don't even know what to call it. So anything other than humanitarian relief. And initially they needed a truck really badly. And I got it for them. So now I can really focus on the humanitarian side. And I'd love to send around this list they sent me today. It's mind-blowing.
But Levine, I think if you were going to do a GoFundMe, you should do it as an individual, not as the radio station. I think the IRS is, you could get in the crosshairs of the IRS if you did it as the radio station.
Were there other legal things that you wanted to address, Ursula, that you
No,
wanted to be careful about, or?
Yeah, I mean, we had a long conversation with our lawyer about this, and the trouble is that everything is a gray area, so there are no hard and fast rules, but I think that, you know, it's a lot of times how it's framed, but if you are blatantly as an organization raising money for another group, especially one that is, I mean, a lot of community radio stations, I guess they are now a community radio station at heart, you know, and outside of the United States, a lot of community radio stations are not nonprofits. There are all sorts of different commercial and non-commercial structures. So that's not unusual for them to be taking on that role as a commercial station. But it raises a lot of questions with the FCC and the IRS. So I think the thing is to just not blatantly be raising money as a you know, community radio station for this cause. I think there are other ways to connect with it without branding it that way.
Well,
And
so then
definitely should keep it that way.
I think we're smart enough between all of us to figure out if Ann says what they need is financing, I would think that maybe not as a low power station, but if we're going to be putting this programming out to our listeners and they begin to understand that they need financial support, there's got to be a way we can somehow make that happen.
Yes, and we did talk about that with our lawyer. And what he said was that, for instance, in this interview that Ann did that I'm editing now, she asks them extensively of what they need. And at one point he says what they need is to kill somebody to kill Putin. I'm not sure. I'm curious for those of you who are station managers, can I put that on the air or not? I'm not sure of, because it's espousing violence. I mean, it's completely understandable. I think we all have had that thought, but beyond that, and I would be interested if anybody has a response to that, but he does talk a lot about what they need and how there are, you know, supply chains coming out of other countries going, that there is a free flow of things coming in from neighboring countries, so that it is possible to do that. And he does talk about what they need. Now, our lawyer said that this is of interest as news. And it can be aired because it's of interest as news. And the trick is just to, at the beginning and the end of the show, say that, we feel that this is relevant news information about what's happening to people in a war situation. And it does not necessarily, the station does not necessarily, endorse any actions. We leave it to the listener to, to think this through on their own. And he felt that would legally be, would hold up. He felt that was legally defensible because it is information of interest about a war situation, to put it, coldly. Does that make sense to you guys? So
Yes, and
that's
thank you
what
for
I'm,
that. That's, we had someone say that similar thing on our show, where we had someone speaking from Ukraine. So obviously it's a well-held sentiment. But yeah, it did kind of like really startle me when he said that, because not that I disagree, but I didn't know if that was okay for us to air. So thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
it seems to me that it's the guest being interviewed. And Ursula, in your example where Bogdan says what we need is for someone to off Putin, that's the guest's opinion. And I assume it's being presented clearly that way. And it's not the station's, it's not the station saying that, it's the guest. Likely anyone listening to it probably agrees with it, but
I
Yeah,
think there's
mean,
this.
go ahead.
I think that there was a censorship around. You can't say that about our government officials, but other governments, they're open season.
That's the American way.
right.
And I mean, as you pointed out, it's not something I said or
Right.
just came out of, that's Bogdan. And he'll say anything. He just says the truth
Well,
in the moment.
Can you blame him?
No,
Can you blame him?
but my
Yeah, I
point
mean-
is that I can't bear to, it's very hard for me to carve away at that
Yeah.
bare truth of his.
So my thought was all these things that we can't say on the air as far as soliciting funds, you can do in a website. So why not just have a website just for this subject, or maybe even just for this series of interviews, and repeat that 2 or 3 times during the segment. And everything you can't say on the air, say it on the website.
Well, okay, let me say this to everyone. I need help personally. Building a website is a thing. And
Well, it can just be a sub page off of the site you already have.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, and as far as the content goes, I don't think there's any problem with us putting it on pacificanetwork.org and, saying in the Sprout Show to hear the full interview. If it's a website expressly to raise money, then we're kind of getting into weird territory. Are you interested in making a website that is focused on fundraising, or are you using Facebook for that?
no, I want to make a website because Facebook is too narrow.
Uh-huh.
And particularly in our case, our audience is mostly in this group. So it's not even the Ann Levine Show page, it's the Ann Levine Show group. And so what we have structured, our website for our show our Facebook pages, all of that is, to support this other show that I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has nothing to do with any of this. I've stumbled into being a war reporter. I
Yeah.
have, and I don't have any infrastructure that supports it that doesn't take away from my other show.
So you're
So-
saying you need a volunteer to help you build a website?
That would be great, or someone to, I don't even know, quite frankly. I'm very overwhelmed. I've had a tremendous amount of responsibility and trust, which I have accepted gladly, placed in front of me, and I've taken it up. But it's getting really hard,
Yeah.
to keep up with it. So, I mean, that's why, I was so grateful that you would edit that interview. I can't tell you what that means to me. So,
No, I understand. I do understand. Yeah.
and all the support, Ursula, that you're giving me is just tremendous, and it's helping them.
So, Anne, are you thinking of making a separate show from your show? Because it sounds like it's not the same vibe as your show, so you want it to be its own entity, is what I'm hearing?
Yes, I definitely see that we have to do 2 shows a week,
Mhm.
and at least. So if Bogdan and I can get to a point where we can have a conversation that's shorter than an hour, and I'm trying to learn how to tell a story in a shorter period of time, that I would like to do, say, a couple a week, or at least one a week.
So that would be your show plus either Ukraine show. That would be 2 shows a week, or your show plus 2 Ukraine shows a week, which would be 3.
Right.
You're kind of figuring it out. Okay.
Or Sprouts is a weekly 30-minute, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Alternatively, could it be just kind of a recurring feature for a part of the
Sure.
Sprouts shows every week? And there's a,
Not every week.
not every week? Well,
No.
but there's usually several segments within each one, isn't it? I can't recall. It's been a little while since I've listened to the program.
We could do it once. Well, Stephanie's the boss of Sprouts, so I shouldn't speak, but not every week. That would be breaking the format of Sprouts, right, Stephanie?
Yeah, it would. I mean, we definitely make exceptions where we have, like a series or so we're flexible, but I don't think every week. I think we would lose people. But
Yeah.
I was
but
thinking,
if we were able to make the Ukraine show, I mean, we could do everything we could to, if it was a separate show, we could go full force and just letting everyone know about it. And I wonder if there's a way we could fast track it somehow,
yeah, how many stations are carrying Sprouts now? Do you know?
120.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's that established base already there. So,
Right. And one thing we could do is we could say, this show is ongoing. If you want to keep listening, go to this place, that might get some attention.
And let me ask you a question. In what Stephanie's talking about, I'm thinking if I were in your shoes, and I could be completely wrong here, but something like that really the first thing I would need would be production support. Somebody, at least one or two people to help with production. Am I correct in that? That's kind of what makes or break a situation like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're definitely, as I say, we're not set up for any of this.
Mhm.
So we're just,
Can we do a call, like a show of hands of who's willing to step in and give you the assistance that we can offer? Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do that. Or should we put it into categories? Like I could help out with editing too. Or
it would be
Yeah.
so incredible to be able to just send you the actualities or to anyone, and have the editing go on from there.
Yeah, I think that's doable. I mean, Davine, I would help with that as much as I can. And I think I could be willing to ask for other editors.
I can help with
Sounds like-
website. I can help with website development.
okay.
And again, I mean, when it comes to setting up a website, it's for them.
Right.
It does not have to be, it's definitely not for the Anne Levine show or for Anne Levine or.
So I'm guessing the website would be like, it would have like a donate button on there to the place. So like just have a place to go. Okay.
I'm willing to help, but y'all need to plug me in once we get going. Got a few skills,
What do you,
moderately developed skills.
I posted links to the two 1 hour shows in the chat. at the
So
moment.
maybe we
Thanks,
should have a
Michael.
separate meeting where we can really talk nuts and bolts with Anne about exactly what we can do and what we can offer.
Sure. I guess, Anne, in terms of this meeting and the people that will be watching this later on, because they will, a lot of people watch these recordings later on. Do you have any thoughts on what stations should think about or keep in mind when reporting on Ukraine? Because I know that a number of stations are interested in covering it and they're kind of trying to get their bearing.
I would say what I'm learning is that there's this small stuff that is what's interesting and in a lot of ways is important about daily life. We talk about, for instance, Bogdan and Roman and these guys, and I forget what's happened to them, that they're living in this bizarre, alternate reality suddenly. And they're not home. They had to abandon pets. Families are all split up. And it's that kind of thing. What do you eat? What do you wear? He tells this story that he forgot to grab any trousers and he was in the same sweatpants for a month. And so there's a whole, and these guys have it pretty good compared to everyone else. So I would say the most important thing is to get to individuals. And it's not that hard to do. With Kraina, the problem is that except for Bogdan, there's no one else except one woman who left the country who's got the English to handle an interview, a radio interview. But search out the people, and I can ask Bogdan to help me with that. You know, I- if anyone would like people to contact that would be interested in being interviewed, you know, that's something that he and I could put together pretty easily. This doctor,
Great
for
offer.
instance, that's on the front, that would be incredible. And I don't have the capacity to take on another person, but someone should talk to this guy,
Right.
particularly in light of trying to raise money for all these medicines and things.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm more than happy to facilitate that to the extent that I'm able. But I would also urge people to do what I did, which is find someone, read some of these stories, you know, reach out and get someone to give you an interview, get someone to talk to you. They want to. It's I'm just every single one of you and every single one of us who are on the air have tremendous power. And use it, mobilize it. You can make a huge difference. I never dreamed this is where I would end up,
Yeah.
you know, and something I read that article and it was like, I got called.
The New Yorker article?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the CBC interview?
I thought that was kind of interesting. The CBC guy was playing it kind of cool and as if, you know, and Bogdan was actually getting a little angry at him and said, "This is war. This is hell. People are dying, and you're all calm and cool and collected here." They didn't say any of those words, but that seemed to be the vibe, and I think he deserved. I thought it was a good interview, but it was interesting dynamics there. Did you get
Yeah.
the thing?
Well, I was so frustrated when I heard it because I felt like that too. I'm not able to be uninvolved. I'm not able to interview these people that are, you know, in the middle of a horrible war and with sort of a detachment. I can't do that.
I
But
thought
I think that's the strength of community radio is that we're able to connect to that level, you know, of the experience of the everyday person who gets caught in the middle of that. I think that's our strength. I mean, this isn't the only place in the world where this is happening, but this is, you know, a place where it's being very clearly articulated, you know, for various reasons. The level of articulation and the extremity of the situation is a very clear voice, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
What I find, and I'm curious if you have any response, what I find confusing or fascinating to me is that when you hear Ukrainians speak, and maybe it's just because it's the ones that are speaking, that there seems to be a lack of confusion on their part. They're not as overwhelmed in how they speak about the experience as I think I would be. You know, I mean, in terms of the level of kind of chaos in terms of thinking about what's happening. They seem, a lot of people seem to remain pretty clear about what they think is happening. And I find that extraordinary that they don't get overwhelmed just by the sense of chaos.
Well, there are these stages they're going through. The conversations I had with Bogdan in the beginning, right after it had all started, are so different than now. And he said, we're getting used to this. So, and it all depends on, these people are in so many different sets of circumstances. Some are much worse off than others. And I think if you went into, oh my God, the hospitals,
Yeah, it would be different.
the front,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this surgeon speaks English and that he might be willing to talk to somebody.
You have another thought, Davine?
He could write it and we could translate it with translate.
Right. And once again, anyone that wants to hear from Roman, any specific questions, email me. My email is levineradio@gmail.com. Email me about anything, any of this, 24/7. Call me. This is what I do now. I'm a volunteer resistance fighter.
That's good.
Well, thank
This
you.
is what
And I
Neil
know
Young was talking about, right? With living with war.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking here, because Bogdan has just written, I believe.
Sorry, Sharon, I stepped on you.
Oh, that's fine. No. See what he has to say.
See, now this is funny. He writes poetry. He's a poet. And I'm a poet. I'm published in many publications, and that came up in a conversation. So anyway, he's just sent me an email about poetry.
That's great.
And that's something I want to talk to him about, in an interview, about his poetry. He reads poems on the air. That's part of the programming now. They have psychologists with advice for dealing with the trauma. They read poems. They tell children's stories. It's so warm and personal and amazing. And he's one of 45 million stories.
I know it's really intense, and to be the sort of like lifeline for them. They're reaching out to you and putting all their hopes and their aspirations and their lives in your hands in a way. Trying to preserve their message and their word and that sort of thing. So I know that's really intense for you to feel that. So I think that there's a great group of people here that are definitely willing to help. It's really interesting to me that you come out of a comedy background and now find yourself in like the most serious situation there is. So thank you. I just want to thank you and just let you know that we're definitely, so many of us willing to help bear this burden, and we will help. And I think it's a great idea to bring a team together, because this is just huge. And there's more people besides the one person, like you said, that want to get their story out there. So maybe we, as we progress, maybe this could be, something where we're getting other voices on the airwaves as well. We have been doing a show, one of our DJs is from Ukraine, and he's been getting people to record messages and play them on air every week. But it's a little dicey whether or not those messages are going to get through that week and whatnot. So maybe there's a way we can incorporate some of your contact stories into that show. Also, that DJ is fluent in Ukrainian, obviously, and would be willing to help us if there's something we need to translate or someone we want to talk to that speaks Ukrainian. I'm volunteering for him, but I think he would be certainly willing to do that.
I'd love to send you this list.
Yeah, please do. Please do. And I'll put my email in the chat as well. And you can always get it through Stephanie or Ursula, but with WXOX in Louisville. And I guess, we're thinking about, I think what you say is really, we are very powerful, and community radio, we're so disjointed though. For us, when we come together, like, we can really make things happen. And one thing that we did last month on the 24th, recognizing 1 month after the invasion, was we played the Ukrainian national anthem in unison. And we had, a couple dozen stations participate in that. So, and we've said that we're going to do that now on the 24th of every month, do some kind of song that we play in synchronicity until this, hopefully gets better. The next month, we're talking about doing a folk song that our Ukrainian DJ suggested. It's a popular song they sing at weddings and things like that. But Ursula and Stephanie has suggested that we should do a movement like that, really recognizing the journalists that have both been persecuted and the ones that persevere in this situation, both in Russia and Ukraine. So I would like to put it out to you, and maybe you could ask them if one of these months they would have a song or something we could all play in unison to recognize what they're doing over there. It doesn't have to be this month, but it could be, So anyway, maybe we can continue that conversation on email. And then, and vice versa, just quickly, it made me think that we could, you're talking about the kind of programming they do. Wouldn't it be really wonderful if we could do a message of support from community stations in the United States that they could then play on their station, potentially? I don't know, but anyway, just thinking.
I'll have to ask him, they're really like religious about only the Ukrainian language being spoken on their station. But who knows?
Maybe we could have our Ukrainian DJ send a message.
Yeah, we can translate it.
That would be great.
Audrey, yeah.
That would be great.
I correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression from your interview that he actually was aware of these efforts in the United States with the Solidarity radio efforts, because I think he referenced them in the interview.
I'm not sure.
Maybe I imagined that. I thought he said something about that, like they had noticed that was happening.
I don't know about that. It could be in there. Was there anything? Michael doesn't remember that either, so I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm imagining it. Also, if he has any, stories or names of journalists that he thinks are of note in Ukraine and Russia, that's information I would like to have.
You mean to get in touch with?
Well, if possible, or just to know about what they've done.
I see.
I know not everybody is accessible, but just,
what would help me tremendously would be if you would email me anyone that has like a request like that for him. Email me. Okay. And I can organize it better than I'm trying to scribble this down, and I don't have faith in what I'm doing. So yeah, emails would be great. There's an email address. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this in this meeting, but I have a PayPal email address for them. If anyone's interested.
Sure, we're not on the air here. So you can.
It's 5 Kraina FM 5 @gmail.com. gmail.com.
Five, Kraina FM 5.
Yeah, number 5, Kraina FM, number 5.
Well,
Cool, thanks for that.
We've gone for quite a while, Stephanie. Maybe we should
Yeah.
let Ann go.
Anne, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It's been a wonderful opportunity. I'm hoping we've had some good ideas. I'm hoping that we can make those happen and help you out a little bit. So
It's great. It's
yeah,
great.
thank
I'm
you.
thrilled.
We're just really touched that what you're doing and continuing to do. It sounds like it takes a lot of energy, and that's just so wonderful that you can have that trusting relationship. So anyway, yeah. So we'll keep the ball rolling, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This was great having you, and we'll focus on. We'll talk more about the website and editing, and we'll go from there. And see
Okay.
people want interviews. Yeah.
I'll have a, thank you, David. I'll have an interview definitely, I would say by Saturday afternoon to early evening. I'll have my next interview with him. Thank you, Sharon.
Are there any specific ways you want it to be edited, or just taking out the ums and ahs and keeping it focused, kind of a thing?
Yeah, the usual.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, thank you again, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you,
On their
everybody.
behalf, thank you too.
Have a great rest of your day.